The first time Elena Carter saw the man who owned half of Chicago's nightmares, he was bleeding across her emergency room floor. Rain hammered the hospital windows like bullets. The automatic doors burst open, and 6 men in black suits stormed in with the kind of silence that made every nurse, doctor, and security guard freeze before anyone screamed. Their coats were soaked. Their faces were cold. Their hands were hidden beneath jackets that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. And between them, carried like a wounded king, was Luca Moretti. Even unconscious, he terrified the room. His black shirt was torn open at the collar, blood spreading beneath the fabric in dark, violent blooms. His dark hair clung wetly to his forehead. His jaw was sharp, his face pale but beautiful in the cruel way. Dangerous men were beautiful like something carved from sin and power. "Trauma Bay 3, Elena shouted before fear could reach her voice. No one moved. One of the men turned his head slowly, and the entire ER seemed to shrink under his stare. Elena grabbed the gurney herself. "Now," she snapped. That broke the spell. Doctors rushed forward. Monitors screamed. Shoes skidded against polished floors. Someone called for blood. Someone else whispered his name, like a prayer they were ashamed of knowing. Luca Moretti, the Mafia boss who turned prosecutors silent. The man rumored to bury enemies beneath construction sites before breakfast. The man Elena had only seen on grainy news footage and whispered warning posts online. And now his blood was on her gloves. She cut through his shirt with trembling scissors, exposing bandages someone had already wrapped badly around his torso. The wound beneath was ugly, fresh, a gunshot, close range. "He's crashing," a resident said. Elena pressed gauze hard into the wound. "Not tonight," she whispered. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because no one deserved to die on her table. Maybe because his hand had moved. At first, she thought it was a reflex. His fingers twitched beside the rail. Then they closed around her wrist. Hard. Elena looked down. His eyes opened, cold gray, burning through pain, locked on her like he had dragged himself back from hell just to see who was touching him. The room vanished around them. For one impossible second, there was no blood, no storm, no armed men, no machines screaming, only his hand around her wrist, only his voice, low and broken. "Who sent you?" Elena's breath caught. "What?" His grip tightened. Not enough to hurt badly, just enough to remind her that even half dead, Luca Moretti still controlled the air. "Who sent you?" he repeated. A doctor leaned in. "Mr. Moretti, you need to—" Luca's stare never left Elena. She felt every man in black watching her now. "I'm your nurse," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "And if you want to live, let go of my hand." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then suspicion, then something darker. His gaze dropped, not to her badge, not to the scissors in her hand, to the thin silver chain that had slipped from beneath her scrub top while she worked. Hanging from it was a small key, old, tarnished, ordinary to anyone else. But Luca Moretti looked at it like it had just opened a grave. His breathing changed. The monitor jumped. One of his men stepped forward. "Boss?" Luca ignored him. His eyes lifted back to Elena's face, and whatever pain had been in them was gone now, replaced by something far more dangerous. Recognition. "No?" he rasped. Elena's stomach turned cold. She had worn that key for 7 years without knowing what it unlocked. Her mother had given it to her before disappearing from Elena's life for good, whispering only one warning: never show this to anyone powerful. Elena had laughed then. She wasn't laughing now. Luca's fingers slid from her wrist to the chain, stopping just short of touching the key. His voice dropped so low only she could hear it. "Do you know what you're carrying?" Elena could barely breathe. A necklace. His mouth tightened, almost like the answer hurt him. Then he looked past her, toward the armed men filling the trauma bay, and his next words turned the entire room colder than the rain outside. She doesn't leave this hospital. Elena stepped back. What did you just say? Luca's eyes returned to hers, and for the first time, Elena understood something terrifying. He wasn't looking at her like a nurse anymore. He was looking at her like a secret, like a threat, like something that belonged to his enemy, and maybe, somehow, to him. Elena Carter had spent most of her life learning how to become invisible. Invisible girls survived longer. That was what her mother used to say when Elena was little, back when they lived in cheap apartments with thin walls and deadbolts that never felt strong enough. Back when her mother would move them every few months without explaining why. Back when Elena knew not to answer the door, not to ask questions, and never ever tell strangers their real last name. Then, one winter morning, her mother disappeared. No goodbye, no note. Only a silver key left on the kitchen table beside a cup of untouched coffee and a message written on the back of an old receipt. Wear this. Hide it. Trust no powerful man. Elena had been 16, old enough to understand abandonment, too young to survive it without breaking. But she did survive. She took 2 buses to school, worked nights washing dishes, slept with a chair wedged under the doorknob, learned how to smile at teachers who asked if everything was okay, learned how to lie without shaking. Years later, she became a nurse because hospitals were the only places where chaos had rules. Blood had pressure. Pain had numbers. Death had protocols. Elena liked protocols. They made the world feel less cruel. But at 3 a.m, with Luca Moretti's blood drying beneath her fingernails and his command still echoing through the trauma bay, no rule in the hospital manual could explain why 6 armed men had surrounded the exits. She doesn't leave this hospital. Those words followed her everywhere. Into the supply room, down the fluorescent hallway, behind the locked bathroom door where she pressed both hands against the sink and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked too pale under the harsh light. Dark strands had escaped her loose bun and clung to her damp cheeks. There was blood on the collar of her blue scrubs. His blood. Luca Moretti's blood. Elena turned on the faucet and scrubbed her hands until her skin burned. It didn't help. She could still feel his fingers around her wrist, still see the way his eyes changed when he saw the key. She grabbed the necklace and shoved it back under her scrub top, heart slamming. For 7 years, that key had been the only thing she had left of her mother. She had hated it, loved it, blamed it, protected it. Some nights, after exhausting shifts, Elena would sit alone in her tiny apartment and hold it in her palm, wondering if it opened a door, a box, a memory, or a nightmare. She had tried antique shops, locksmiths, online forums. No one knew anything. Now Luca Moretti knew, and that terrified her more than any rumor about him. A knock hit the bathroom door. Elena Froze. Nurse Carter. Male voice. Flat. Controlled. One of his men. She didn't answer. Nurse Carter, he repeated. Mr. Moretti wants to see you. Elena let out a bitter laugh before she could stop herself. Tell Mr. Moretti I'm busy trying not to have a panic attack. Silence. Then, he said you would say no. Her hand tightened around the sink. He was right. He also said to tell you that running would be a mistake. Her blood went cold. Elena opened the door. The man standing outside was broad-shouldered, expressionless, with a scar near his left eyebrow. He didn't point a weapon. He didn't need to. Behind him, 2 security guards stood at the nurse's station, pretending not to see anything. Cowards, Elena thought. Then she hated herself for thinking it. They were afraid. Everyone was afraid. That was what Luca Moretti did to rooms. He didn't just enter them. He owned the oxygen inside them. I have patients, Elena said. He is your patient. I'm not his private property. The man's eyes flickered, almost amused. No, he said. but something you're carrying might be. Elena's breath stopped. The key felt suddenly heavy against her chest. She pushed past him before fear could root her to the floor. The ER had changed. It was quieter now, but not calmer. A false quiet. The kind that came before violence. Nurses moved with careful faces. Doctors spoke in low voices. Patients stared from behind curtains. Police had arrived, but they remained near the entrance, blocked by Moretti's men with polite smiles and dead eyes. Elena saw one officer look directly at her, then look away. That hurt more than she expected. Trauma Bay 3 was dim except for the glow of monitors and the cold white spill of overhead light. Luca lay propped against pillows now, shirt gone, torso wrapped in clean bandages. An IV ran into his arm. His skin was pale from blood loss, but nothing about him looked weak. Weakness had no permission to touch him. His eyes opened before she stepped fully inside. "Elena Carter," he said. Her name in his mouth felt invasive. She stopped near the doorway. "I don't remember introducing myself." "You wear a badge. You read while bleeding out? I noticed threats. I saved your life." His gaze moved over her face slowly. "That remains to be proven." Anger flared through her fear. Good. Anger was warmer. Anger made her hand stop shaking. "You know what?" Elena stepped closer. "I don't care who you are. I don't care how many men you have standing outside. This is a hospital. You are a patient. I am a nurse. You don't get to kidnap me because you saw my necklace." The room became very still. One of his men shifted near the wall. Luca lifted 2 fingers. The man stopped. Elena noticed that. One gesture. No words. Absolute obedience. Luca studied her with a focus so intense it felt like being held underwater. "Who gave it to you?" he asked. Elena swallowed. "My mother." "Her name?" "No." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what that key means? Then explain it." His eyes hardened. "Not here." She laughed once, quietly, because if she didn't laugh, she might cry. "Of course, not here. Let me guess. Somewhere private? Somewhere with no witnesses? Somewhere people disappear?" His expression shifted. Barely, but Elena saw it. A faint shadow crossing his face, almost like her words had struck somewhere old. "I don't hurt women who don't betray me," he said. "That's supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to warn you." Elena looked away first. She hated herself for it, but his stare was too much. Not just intimidating, searching, like he was peeling back layers she had spent years building. Like he could see the exhaustion beneath her defiance. The loneliness, the unpaid bills, the cracked phone screen, the second-hand shoes, the empty apartment waiting for her after every night shift. Luca's voice changed. Softer, but not gentle. "You live alone." Her eyes snapped back. "Stop. You work double shifts." I said stop. "You send money every month to a storage unit under your mother's name." The world tilted. Elena could not breathe. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer. Her pulse thundered in her ears. That storage unit was the last place her mother's life existed. Old clothes, boxes of documents, photographs. Elena was too angry to look through. She paid for it every month, because closing it felt like admitting her mother was never coming back. No one knew about it. No one. Luca watched her carefully, and for the first time since he had arrived, Elena saw something beneath the danger. Not pity, not kindness, recognition, as if he understood what it meant to keep paying rent on a ghost. "You've been alone for a long time," he said. Her throat tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Talk. Like you know me." "I know enough." "No. You know numbers. Addresses. Maybe records your men pulled illegally while I was trying to keep you alive." Her voice trembled now, and she hated that too. You don't know what it feels like to come home after 16 hours and eat cereal over the sink because sitting down makes the apartment feel too empty. You don't know what it feels like to keep your phone on loud every night for 7 years just in case the mother who left you finally calls. You don't know what it feels like to be so tired of surviving that kindness starts to feel suspicious. Luca said nothing. The monitors beeped softly between them. Elena realized too late what she had admitted. Her face burned. She stepped back. I need to go. Elena. The sound of her name stopped her. Not because it was a command this time. Because it was quieter. Because it almost sounded human. She turned. Luca's hand rested near the edge of the bed. The same hand that had gripped her wrist in the trauma bay. His fingers were bruised. Knuckles split. A ring glinted darkly on his right hand. You're not safe anymore, he said. A chill moved through her. I wasn't safe the moment you came in here. No. His eyes dropped briefly to where the key lay hidden beneath her scrubs. You weren't safe long before that. The door opened behind her. A young resident stepped in, nervous and pale. Nurse Carter? There's someone asking for you at reception. Elena frowned. At this hour? The resident glanced at Luca, then quickly away. He says he's family. Elena's stomach twisted. I don't have family. The resident swallowed. He asked for you by name. Luca's entire body changed. It was subtle, but terrifying. The wounded patient disappeared. The king returned. His gaze cut to the man by the wall. Lock down the east exit. Elena turned sharply. What is happening? Luca was already trying to sit up. The monitor protested. The IV line tugged. Elena moved on instinct. Are you insane? Lie down. He ignored her, eyes fixed on the door. Did he give a name? Luca asked. The resident looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Yes. Rain cracked against the windows. The lights flickered once. Elena felt the key burning against her chest as the resident whispered the name. Danchihusu. The effect was immediate. Every man in the room reached for a weapon. Luca looked at Elena, and what she saw in his eyes stole the last warmth from her body. Not fear, fury, and beneath it, something worse. Confirmation. Luca's voice dropped into a deadly calm. Your mother didn't disappear, Elena. She couldn't move. She ran from him. The hallway outside erupted into shouting. Then glass shattered somewhere near the front entrance. Luca reached for her hand. This time, Elena didn't pull away, and as his bloodied fingers closed around hers, he said the words that broke open every lie she had ever lived inside. Dante Russo is my enemy. His eyes fell to the hidden key, and whatever secret your mother left you with, he just came to take it back. The first scream came from the reception desk. It tore through the emergency room like a warning shot. For 1 second, no one moved. Then the hospital became chaos. Patients cried behind curtains. Nurses backed away from the main corridor. A crash echoed from the front entrance, followed by the sharp, panicked sound of metal carts overturning. Somewhere, a child started sobbing. Somewhere else, a doctor shouted for security, as if security had not already decided survival mattered more than bravery. Elena stood frozen beside Luca Moretti's bed, her hand trapped inside his. Danchihusu. The name meant nothing to her, and somehow it had turned every armed man in the room into a loaded weapon. Who is he? She demanded. Luca didn't look at her. His eyes were on the door, cold and focused. The reason your mother taught you to hide. Another scream, closer this time. Elena's pulse slammed against her ribs. That's not an answer. It's the only one you have time for. He pulled the IV from his arm. Blood welled instantly. Elena, the resident gasped. He can't. Luca stare cut him silent. Elena moved before thinking, grabbing gauze and pressing it to Luca's arm. You were shot. You lost blood. You stand up right now and you'll collapse. Luca looked down at her hand on his skin. For one strange heartbeat, the violence outside felt far away. His voice dropped. Then stay close enough to catch me. She hated that her breath caught. Hated the way danger wrapped around him like perfume. Hated the part of her that noticed how steady he sounded while the whole hospital was falling apart. The scarred man by the wall opened his jacket and drew a black pistol. Elena stepped back, horror flooding her face. No weapons in my trauma bay. The man did not even blink. Luca's eyes shifted to him. Marco. The man lowered the gun slightly. Not away, just slightly. Elena stared at Luca. You're not in charge here. He finally looked at her. The room seemed to darken around his gaze. Right now, I'm the only reason you're still alive. The doors at the far end of the ER opened. A man in a grey overcoat walked in, as if he had not heard the screams. As if the hospital belonged to him too. He was older than Luca, maybe mid-40s, with silver threaded through black hair and a face too calm for the violence surrounding him. He carried no visible weapon. He didn't need one. Two men followed behind him, dragging a bleeding security guard by the collar before dropping him onto the tile like trash. Elena's stomach twisted. The man's eyes found her immediately. Not Luca. Here. His smile was slow. Intimate. Wrong. Elena Carter, he said. Her name sounded dirtier in his mouth. Luca's hand tightened around hers. Dante Russo's gaze moved to their joined fingers, and something amused flickered across his face. Well, he murmured. That complicates things. The ER seemed to hold its breath. Dante stepped farther inside, polished shoes avoiding the blood on the floor. Elena, Luca said quietly. Behind me. She didn't move, because the command angered her, because obeying him felt like surrender, because Dante was staring at her like he had known her before she knew herself. Do I know you? She asked. Dante's smile softened. It was almost fatherly. That made it worse. No, he said. But I knew your mother very well. The key beneath Elena's scrubs felt suddenly unbearable. Luca's voice became ice. Say her name and you die here. Dante laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to humiliate the threat. You're bleeding on a hospital bed, Luca. Don't perform strength you don't have. Luca started forward. Elena caught his arm on instinct. She felt the strain beneath his skin, the heat, the weakness. He refused to admit. For a second, his eyes flashed down to her touch. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. His smile sharpened. Careful, Elena. Men like him make women feel protected right before they turn them into property. Elena lifted her chin, though her knees felt hollow. And men like you break into hospitals at 3 a.m? I came to bring you home. The words hit her like cold water. Home. A word she had spent her whole life wanting. A word no stranger had the right to use. I don't have a home with you. Dante's expression changed. Only slightly, but the warmth drained from it. No, he said. Because your mother stole you from one. Elena went still. Behind her, the monitor beside Luca's bed beeped too fast. What did you say? Dante took another step. Luca's men shifted instantly, guns rising. So did Dante's. Suddenly the ER was full of weapons, trembling doctors, and terrified patients trapped between two criminal empires. Elena looked around in horror. Stop, she said. No one listened. Stop, she shouted. Her voice cracked across the trauma bay. For one impossible moment, both sides froze. Elena's breathing came fast. She stepped away from Luca, into the open space between the guns. Luca's face hardened. Elena. She ignored him. Her eyes stayed on Dante. You came here for the key. Dante tilted his head. His gaze dropped to her chest. So he knew. Of course he knew. I came for what belongs to my family. I'm not your family. Something dark moved across his face. Oh, sweetheart, he said softly. That's the first lie your mother taught you. Elena felt the floor vanish beneath her. Luca moved behind Scuston. Scust enough that she could feel his body heat. He was wounded, barely standing. Still, his presence filled the space like a wall. Don't listen to him, he said. Dante's eyes glittered. Ask him why. Elena turned slightly. Luca said nothing. That silence told her too much. Her throat tightened. Why shouldn't I listen to him? Luca's jaw flexed. Not hesitation. Calculation. She saw it, and something inside her cracked. You know something, she whispered. Dante smiled. He knows everything. Luca's stare stayed on Dante. Elena, this is not how you want to learn the truth. A bitter laugh escaped her. I don't think anyone has ever cared how I learned the truth. That landed. She saw it hit him, not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But his eyes shifted, just for a second, from command to something almost regretful. Dante seized the silence. Your mother's name was Marisol Vale, he said. Elena's breath stopped. Val? Not Carter. Her mother had used Carter for as long as Elena could remember. Or maybe Elena only remembered what she had been allowed to remember. She was beautiful, Dante continued. Brilliant. Dangerous when frightened. She worked for me once. Luca's voice cut in. She was forced. Dante ignored him. She carried records, names, accounts, proof of alliances that could destroy half the old families in Chicago. His gaze settled on the hidden key, and then she vanished with access to something that was never hers. Elena shook her head slowly. No, not because she knew he was lying, because part of her feared he wasn't. My mother was a waitress, she said. She cleaned motel rooms. She cut coupons. She was scared of thunderstorms. Dante's eyes softened again. A performance of sympathy. She was scared of me. Luca moved so fast, Elena barely saw it. 1 second, he was behind her. The next, he had Dante by the throat and slammed him against the glass partition hard enough to crack it. Gasps exploded through the ER. Luca swayed from the effort, blood spreading beneath his bandage, but his grip did not loosen. Speak to her like that again, Luca whispered, and I'll open you from jaw to sternum. Dante did not struggle. He smiled with Luca's hand around his throat. There he is, he rasped. The monster pretending to be her savior. Elena stared at Luca, at the fury in his face, at the blood soaking through the white bandage at his ribs, at the way his entire body seemed built to destroy whatever threatened the person behind him. Fear moved through her. But not only fear, that was the worst part, because beneath it was something warm and dangerous, a feeling she had no name for, a feeling that made her step toward him instead of away. Luca, she said. His grip remained locked around Dante's throat. Luca. This time, his eyes flicked to her, just briefly, but enough. Let him go, she said. His expression hardened, as if obedience tasted like poison. Then he released Dante. Dante coughed once, straightened his coat, and looked at Elena with new interest. My, he said, he listens to you already. Elena's face burned. Luca looked ready to kill him all over again. Then Dante reached into his coat. Every gun in the room lifted, but he only pulled out a photograph. Old, folded, water damaged at the edges. He held it up between 2 fingers. Elena didn't want to look. She looked anyway. A young woman stood in front of a black car, wind whipping dark hair across her face. Elena's mother, younger, fiercer, unsmiling. Beside her stood Dante Russo, and in her arms was a baby wrapped in a white blanket. Elena's lungs stopped working. No, she whispered. Dante's smile disappeared. For the first time, his face became honest, cold, possessive. She took my child, he said. The ER fell silent. Elena could hear nothing but the rain, the monitors, her own heartbeat turning monstrous inside her chest. Luca stepped closer to her. "Elena," he said, low and urgent. "Look at me." She couldn't. Her eyes stayed on the photograph, on her mother's arms, on the baby, on Dante's face beside them. "No," she said again, but the words sounded weaker now. Dante lowered the photograph. "You were never abandoned," he said. "You were hidden." Elena's hand rose slowly to the key beneath her scrubs. Her fingers closed around it. Luca saw. Dante saw. Everyone saw. Dante's voice softened into something almost tender. "Come with me, Elena. I can explain everything your mother stole from you." Luca's hand closed around her wrist. This time, not hard, not controlling, desperate. "Do not take one step toward him." Elena turned on him, tears burning in her eyes. "Why?" she demanded. "Because he's lying?" Luca said nothing. Her voice broke. "Tell me he's lying." The silence that followed was worse than a confession. Elena pulled her wrist from Luca's hand. Pain flashed across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Almost. Dante extended his hand. "Elena." The hospital lights flickered again. The storm outside swallowed the windows in white rain. And then, from somewhere behind Dante, a nurse screamed, "Fire!" Smoke began crawling along the ceiling. Dante's men turned. Luca's men raised their weapons. A gunshot cracked through the ER. Glass exploded. People dropped to the floor. Luca lunged for Elena, his arms wrapped around her as the world shattered around them, dragging her down behind the trauma bed just as bullets tore through the machines above. Elena hit the floor beneath him, breath knocked from her chest. His body covered hers completely, wounded, blading, unshaking, protecting her from both sides. His mouth was near her ear when he spoke, voice rough with pain and fury. "Now you understand." Elena trembled beneath him, the key cutting into her palm. "Understand what?" Luca lifted his head just enough for her to see his eyes. "They won't stop until they own what your mother died hiding." Elena's blood turned cold. Died. Not disappeared. Died. Before she could ask, another explosion rocked the hospital entrance, and in the flashing emergency lights, Elena saw Dante Russo watching her through the smoke with a father's face and a predator's eyes. Then he smiled and vanished into the chaos. Smoke turned the emergency room into a nightmare of flashing red light and broken glass. Elena couldn't tell whether screams ended and the alarms began. The ceiling sprinklers burst open, raining cold water over blood, overturned carts, shattered monitors, and terrified patients crawling toward safety. Nurses dragged 4 stands out of the chaos. A doctor pressed both hands against a wounded security guard's chest. Somewhere near the entrance, flames licked up the side of a curtain before water beat them down into black steam, and Luca Moretti was still on top of her. His body shielded hers behind the trauma bed, one arm braced against the floor, his wounded side trembling from the effort. His face was close enough that she could see the pain he was hiding. A vein pulsed in his jaw. Blood had soaked through his bandage and spread down his ribs in a dark red line. He had used his own body as a wall. "For here." Elena shoved at his shoulder. "Move. You're bleeding." "I've been bleeding." "That's not funny." "I wasn't joking." A bullet struck the metal cabinet above them. Elena flinched. Luca's hand came to the back of her head instantly, pressing her down, covering her with terrifying calm. "Stay low." His voice was rough, controlled. Too controlled for a man who should have been unconscious. Elena looked at his face through the mist of the sprinklers and smoke. "You said my mother died." Something dark passed through his eyes. Not surprise. Regret. That was worse. "Elena." "No." Her voice shook. "You don't get to say that and then protect me like I owe you trust." Another gunshot cracked across the ER. Luca's men returned fire from near the nurse station. Dante's men had already disappeared into the smoke, but Elena could hear movement beyond the double doors. Heavy footsteps, shouts, the the squeal of someone dragging furniture to block an exit. The hospital was no longer a hospital. It was a battlefield. Luca shifted, pulling Elena behind a rolling surgical cart. His breath hitched once, barely audible, but Elena heard it. Nurse instincts overpowered fear. She grabbed his wrist. "You're going to tear the wound open." His eyes cut to hers. "Then close it later. You're impossible. I'm alive. Barely. Because of you." The words hit too softly. Elena hated that they did. For a second, the chaos faded around them again. His gaze held hers with something that was not tenderness, exactly, but close enough to be dangerous. Then Marco appeared through the smoke, pistol raised, face hard. "Boss, East Corridor is blocked. Russo's men cut the elevators. Police are outside but not entering." "Of course they aren't," Luca muttered. Marco looked at Elena. "We need to move her." Elena stiffened. "Her has a name." Marco ignored her. Russo pulled back, but he left people inside. Luca's expression changed. "How many?" "At least 4. Maybe more." "Purpose?" Marco hesitated. That hesitation made Elena's stomach sink. Luca saw it too. "Say it." Marco's eyes flicked to Elena's necklace, hidden beneath her soaked scrubs. "They're searching staff lockers." Elena's blood went cold. Her locker, her bay, her phone. Her life reduced to something men with guns could rip apart. Luca turned to her. "Did you bring anything from the storage unit tonight?" "No." "Anything from your mother?" "Just the key." "Are you sure?" Her mouth opened, then closed, because she remembered. The envelope. A small yellow envelope she had found 2 nights ago in her mother's storage unit, tucked inside an old winter coat. She had been too exhausted to open it after shift. She had shoved it into her work bag and forgotten. Luca watched her face. His own hardened. "Elena," she swallowed. "There's an envelope in my locker." Marco cursed under his breath. Luca gripped the side of the cart and pushed himself up. Elena grabbed him. "No, absolutely not." His gaze did not move from the hallway. "Marco, take 2 men. Retrieve it." "It's staff-only access," Elena said quickly. "There's a keypad." Marco looked at her. "Code." Elena hesitated, then laughed once, bitter and broken. "You people break into hospitals, shoot through trauma bays, and now you need my locker code?" Luca looked at her. In the red emergency light, soaked in blood and sprinkler water, he looked less like a man and more like a warning her mother had failed to finish. "Give him the code," he said. "No." His jaw tightened. "Elena." "No." Her voice rose. "I am done obeying men who think fear makes them honest. Dante says, I'm his child. You say my mother is dead. Everyone knows my life, except me. So if that envelope is the first real answer I've ever had, I'm getting it myself." Marco looked at Luca, as if waiting for permission to physically stop her. Luca didn't give it. He stared at Elena for a long, burning second. Then he said, "Fine." Marco snapped. "Boss, she comes with me." Elena blinked. "With you? You can barely stand." Luca leaned closer, eyes cold enough to make her breath catch. "Then don't let me fall." They moved, through hell. Marco and another man went first, guns low. Elena stayed close to Luca despite every rational thought screaming at her not to. His hand hovered near her back, never quite touching, guiding without pushing. She could feel heat radiating from him, could hear the strain in his breathing, could see the trail of blood he was pretending not to leave behind. At the nurse station, Mrs. Alvarez, the oldest nurse on shift, grabbed Elena's arm. "Elena, what is happening?" Elena wanted to answer, wanted to say, "I don't know. I'm scared. I think my entire life was a lie." Instead, she squeezed the woman's hand. "Get everyone into radiology. Lock the doors." Mrs. Alvarez looked at Luca, then at the armed men around him. Fear filled her face, but she nodded. The staff locker room was at the end of a narrow hall behind double doors. The lights flickered overhead. Water dripped from Luca's hair onto his cheek. His skin had gone dangerously pale. Elena punched in the code with shaking fingers. The door clicked. Before she could open it, Luca pulled her back. Too late. The door exploded outward. A man lunged from inside with a knife. Luca caught his wrist mid-air. The force of it drove Luca back into the wall, pain flashing across his face. Elena screamed. Marco moved, but Luca was faster, even wounded. He twisted the attacker's arm until bone cracked, then drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man dropped. Elena started. Luca swayed. She caught him before she could think. His weight hit her hard, his breath hot against her temple. Still barely standing, he rasped. "Shut up," she whispered, gripping him tighter. Inside the locker room, everything had been destroyed. Purses emptied. Coats sliced open. Lockers bent from their frames. Elena ran to hers. The lock was broken. Her bag lay on the floor. Contents scattered across wet tile. No envelope. Her chest caved in. "No," she whispered. She dropped to her knees, searching under the bench, inside her shoes beneath ruined scrubs. Nothing. Someone had taken it. Behind her, Luca's voice went deadly quiet. "Marco." Marco crouched beside the unconscious attacker and searched his coat. A phone, a blade, a black card embossed with a silver raven. Luca saw it and went still. Elena looked up. "What is that?" Marco's face had lost color. Luca took the card between two fingers. For the first time since Elena had met him, something like disbelief cracked through his control. "That isn't Russo's mark." Elena's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Luca looked at her, and suddenly the war between him and Dante felt small. Too small, like they had both been standing inside a trap, built by someone else. His voice lowered. "It means Dante didn't come here alone." A sound came from Elena's locker, a tiny vibration. Her phone. It was half hidden beneath her jacket, screen cracked, buzzing with an unknown number. Elena picked it up with trembling fingers. A message glowed across the screen. "Open the key, little Carter. Both men are lying." Another message appeared beneath it. "Your mother is alive." Elena stopped breathing. Luca read it over her shoulder. His face went completely still. Then, from the darkness beyond the locker room door, a woman's voice whispered Elena's name. Soft, broken, impossible. Elena. The phone slipped from her hand, because she knew that voice. She had heard it in dreams for 7 years. Her mother was standing at the end of the hall, soaked from the rain, older than memory, with fear in her eyes and blood on her coat. And behind her, aimed straight at Elena's heart, was Dante Russo's gun. For 7 years, Elena Carter had imagined her mother 1,000 different ways. Dead in a river, happy somewhere else, trapped, cowardly, cruel. Sometimes, on the worst nights, Elena imagined her standing outside the apartment door, hand raised to knock, too ashamed to come inside. But she had never imagined this. Marisol Vale stood at the end of the hospital corridor, under flickering emergency lights, rainwater dripping from her dark coat onto the tile. Her face was older, thinner, carved by fear and survival. Her hair, once dark in the photograph Dante had shown, was streaked with silver now and plastered to her cheeks. But her eyes were the same. Elena knew them before her mind could accept the rest. Her mother's eyes. "Elena," Marisol whispered again. The sound broke something inside her. Elena took one step forward. Luca's arm came across her body, like a steel bar. "Don't." She turned on him, wild with disbelief. "That's my mother. That's a trap. That's my mother." Dante's gun pressed against Marisol's side from behind. He stepped into the light slowly, one hand holding the weapon, the other resting almost gently on Marisol's shoulder. The gesture made Elena sick. Family reunions, Dante said softly, should be private. Luca's men raised their guns. Dante smiled. Careful. She moves, I shoot her. Marisol's face twisted. Elena, run. The words hit harder than any bullet could have. Not, I'm sorry. Not I missed you. Run. The same command her whole childhood had been built around. Elena's body trembled. Luca did not move. His focus was pure violence now, cold and precise, but his body betrayed him. Blood had soaked through the bandage beneath his torn hospital wrap. His breathing was shallow. His grip on Elena's waist was firm, but she could feel the weakness spreading through him. Dante saw it too. You should sit down, Luca, he said. You're starting to look mortal. Luca's mouth curved without warmth. You should shoot if you're going to shoot. Marisol flinched. Elena's heart lurched. Stop. Both men looked at her. For one awful second, Elena felt the truth of her new life settle around her. Men with guns were waiting for her to decide who mattered more. The mother who abandoned her, the Mafia boss who saved her, the father who claimed her like stolen property, the key that had turned her life into a war. I'll come with you, Elena said. Luca's head snapped toward her. No, she didn't look at him. If she looked at him, she might lose the nerve. Dante's smile softened. Good girl. Luca moved so fast she barely saw it. His hand caught her arm. Not painful, but absolute. You are not going with him. Elena finally looked at him. His eyes burned with something far more dangerous than authority. Fear. Not for himself. For here. The realization nearly undid her. You don't get to decide that, she whispered. If he takes you, you disappear. If I don't go, he shoots her. Marisol shook her head, tears cutting through rain and grime on her cheeks. No, Elena, don't trade yourself for me. Not after everything. Elena laughed once, broken and bitter. After everything? You mean after you left me? Marisol's face collapsed. Dante's fingers tightened on her shoulder. There will be time for blame later, Dante said. Right now, Elena comes with me. Luca's voice dropped into a deadly calm. She takes one step toward you. This hospital becomes your grave. Dante tilted his head. And hers? The corridor went silent. Elena looked at her mother, at the gun, at Luca bleeding beside her. Then she did the only thing no one expected. She reached beneath her scrubs and pulled out the key. Every eye locked onto it. A small, tarnished piece of metal swinging from a silver chain. So ordinary. So catastrophic. You want this? Elena asked. Dante's expression changed. Hunger flashed through his face before he buried it. Marisol's eyes widened. Elena. No. Luca's hand tightened around her arm. Put it away. Elena ignored them both. I'm done being moved around like evidence, she said, voice shaking but clear. I'm done with half-truths and men deciding what parts of my life I'm allowed to know. Dante's smile faded. Good. Fear made people honest. At least, Elena hoped it did. You want the key, she continued. You want me. You want whatever my mother hid. So here's what happens. You let her go, and I walk out with you. Luca swore under his breath. Marisol sobbed. No. Dante studied here. Elena, he said gently, you don't know how to bargain with men like us. No, she said. I learned from surviving them. Something flickered across Luca's face. Pride, wine, possession, all of it gone in an instant. Dante lifted the gun slightly away from Marisol's ribs. Come here first. No. His eyes hardened. Elena lifted the chain higher. Let her go first. For a long second, no one breathed. Then Dante shoved Marisol forward. She stumbled. Marco caught her before she fell, dragging her behind Luca's men. Dante's gun stayed trained on Elena. Marisol struggled instantly. Elena! No! Elena didn't move yet. Her gaze cut to Luca. He was watching her with a stillness that frightened her more than his anger. Not because he had surrendered, because he was planning. "Elena," he said softly. Her throat tightened. Soft from Luca, felt more dangerous than a command. "Don't." For one heartbeat. The hallway narrowed to only them. Blood on his skin, rain in her hair, smoke in the air, his eyes holding hers like a locked door. She wanted to believe him. That was the terrifying part. She wanted to step back into his protection, to let his world swallow the danger before it reached her, to be tired for once and let someone else carry the terror. But she had been abandoned by love before, and she did not yet know the difference between protection and ownership. "I have to know the truth," she whispered. Then she stepped toward Dante. Luca moved. So did Dante. The gun fired. Elena screamed, not because she was hit, because Luca was. He had crossed the space between them with impossible speed, shoving her behind him as the bullet tore into his shoulder. His body jerked. Blood sprayed across the wall. Then chaos erupted. Marco fired. Dante disappeared backward through the smoke. Marisol screamed Elena's name. Luca staggered, but his hand locked around Elena's wrist, pulling her hard against him. "Move," he growled. Elena tried to hold him up. "You were shot again." Observant. "Luca." He dragged her toward the stairwell as bullets cracked behind them. His men formed a wall around Marisol and Elena, pushing through the hospital's back corridor. Alarms screamed overhead. The emergency lights flashed red across Luca's face, making him look brutal, half dead, untouchable. They burst through a service door into the rain. Cold air slammed into Elena. 3 black SUVs waited in the ambulance bay, engines running, windows tinted. More men in dark suits stood around them with weapons hidden beneath coats. The storm swallowed the city in silver sheets, turning the hospital lights into blurred halos. Elena stopped dead. "No." Luca turned, breathing hard. "Get in." "No. I'm not leaving with you." His eyes darkened. "This is not a debate. My mother is still inside. My men have her." "Your men?" Elena's voice cracked. "Do you hear yourself?" Another burst of gunfire echoed from inside the hospital. Luca stepped closer, towering over her despite the blood dripping down his arm. "I hear every second we waste giving Dante another chance to take you. You don't own me." "No," he said, voice rough. "But I will keep you alive whether you hate me for it or not." The words landed too deep. Before Elena could answer, Marco shoved open the SUV door. Boss now. Luca's control finally fractured. His knees buckled. Elena caught him. The weight of him nearly took her down. His blood soaked into her scrubs, hot even in the rain. His face pressed briefly against her shoulder, and for one dizzying moment, the most feared man in Chicago was only a wounded man bleeding in her arms. "Elena," he murmured. Not a command. A confession of weakness he would never admit awake. Her anger cracked. "Get him in," she snapped. Marco and another man helped Luca into the SUV. Elena climbed in after him before she could reconsider. The door slammed. The city vanished behind black glass. The SUV surged forward into the storm. Inside, the leather smelled of smoke, rain, and expensive cologne. Luca leaned against the seat, jaw clenched, blood running beneath his fingers as he pressed his hand to his shoulder. Elena grabbed the emergency medical kit from the floor. Of course he had one. Of course the Mafia traveled with trauma supplies. "Take off your jacket," she said. His eyes opened slowly. Even wounded, he managed to look amused. "You're ordering me now?" "I'm saving your life again. Don't make it annoying." A faint, pained curve touched his mouth. Then he obeyed. Barely. Elena cut away the fabric around the wound, hands steady because this was the only thing she understood. Blood, pressure, damage, survival. She cleaned the wound while the SUV sped through wet streets, flanked by dark vehicles like a funeral procession for someone still breathing. Luca watched her work. too closely. What? She snapped. You were willing to give yourself to him for her. She's my mother. She left you. Elena pressed gauze harder than necessary. He inhaled sharply. Careful, he said. Then stop talking. She left you, Luca repeated, lower this time. And you still stepped forward. Elena's hand slowed. Rain streaked the window beside them like tears she refused to shed. Maybe I wanted one person in my life to be worth saving, she said. Silence filled the car. Luca's gaze changed. Something in it softened, then sharpened, as if softness was a weakness he punished himself for feeling. You are, he said. Elena looked up. The words were quiet. Too quiet. She wished they hadn't reached her. She wished her chest hadn't tightened. The SUV turned hard, tires hissing against wet pavement. Elena braced herself with one hand against Luca's chest. His uninjured hand covered hers before she could pull away. Warm, bloody, possessive. Where are you taking me? She asked. My house. Her stomach dropped. No, it's fortified. That does not make it comforting. It isn't meant to comfort you. Then, what is it meant to do? His thumb moved once against the back of her hand. Small, almost unconscious. Keep what is mine from being taken. Elena pulled back as if burned. I am not yours. Luca's eyes locked on hers. The storm outside flashed white, lightning revealing the hard lines of his face, the blood on his throat, the dangerous calm returning to him piece by piece. No, he said. A pause. Not yet. Her breath caught. The SUV drove through iron gates before she could speak. Beyond them rose a mansion hidden behind black trees and rain, all stone walls, high windows, security lights, and armed silhouettes moving along the entrance like shadows trained to kill. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress, a prison dressed as luxury. The car stopped. Men rushed forward with umbrellas and guns. Elena looked at Luca, fear and fury tangling inside her. You said you were keeping me alive. I am. The door opened. Cold rain swept in. Luca leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. But inside my world, survival has rules. His eyes dropped to the key at her throat. And tonight, Elena, you learn every one of them. The Moretti estate looked less like a mansion and more like a warning built from stone. Tall iron gates closed behind the convoy with a deep metallic groan, locking Elena inside a world she had only read about in headlines and court documents that vanished before trial. Rain swept across the long driveway in silver sheets. Security lights cut through the storm, catching the silhouettes of armed men posted along balconies, under archways, beside black cars with tinted windows. Everything about the place was beautiful. Everything about it felt designed to keep people in, or keep enemies out. Elena wasn't sure which frightened her more. The SUV door opened, and cold rain rushed in. Two men moved toward Luca, but he lifted one bloodied hand and stopped them. I can walk. Elena stared at him. You absolutely cannot. His eyes shifted to her, dark with pain and stubborn pride. Watch me. He stepped out of the SUV. For 3 seconds, Luca Moretti looked exactly like the man Chicago feared. Tall, broad-shouldered, soaked in rain and blood, face carved from control, men lowering their eyes as he passed. Then, his knee gave out. Elena caught him before anyone else could. His weight slammed into her side. She staggered, one arm wrapping around his waist, the other gripping his torn shirt. For a breath, his face pressed against her hair, his body shaking with the effort of staying upright. Still walking? She muttered. His mouth brushed near her temple. Technically, you're impossible. You keep saying that, because you keep trying to die dramatically. A faint sound escaped him, almost a laugh. It disappeared quickly, swallowed by pain. Marco rushed forward. Boss. Luca's expression hardened again. The weakness gone from his face, even though Elena could feel it in every trembling muscle. Get Marisol inside. East wing. No one touches her until I question her. Elena stiffened. You mean until I talk to her? Luca looked at her. The rain ran down his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. You will talk to her when I know she isn't still working with Russo. The words hit like a slap. Elena shoved away from him. He almost fell. Marco caught him this time. My mother had a gun pressed to her ribs. Elena snapped. She told me to run, and she stayed hidden for 7 years. Elena's chest tightened. You don't know what he did to her. No, Luca said. But I know what fear makes people do. Something in his voice changed at the end. A shadow. A door half opened, then slammed shut. Before Elena could answer, Marisol appeared from another SUV, wrapped in a black coat someone had thrown over her shoulders. 2 Moretti guards stood near her, not touching her, but close enough that she clearly had nowhere to go. Elena, Marisol said. Elena moved toward her. Luca's voice stopped her. Not yet. Elena turned slowly. Rain dripped from her hair into her eyes. Her scrubs clung coldly to her skin. Blood stained her sleeves, her chest, her hands. His blood, her life. Everything had become tangled in one impossible night. You do not get to stand between me and my mother, she said. Luca's gaze did not soften. That woman is connected to every lie that almost got you killed tonight. She is still my mother, and you are still breathing because I don't trust her. The silence between them burned hotter than anger. Marisol looked at Luca then, and Elena saw something pass between them. Not recognition exactly. History. The kind that left scars. You look like your father, Marisol said quietly. Every man near them seemed to go still. Luca's face changed. Not much, but enough. His eyes went flat. Take her inside. Elena grabbed his arm. What does she mean? Luca didn't answer. Luca. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. There are things you don't want to know yet. Elena laughed, but it came out, broken. Do you understand how insane that sounds after everything that happened tonight? Yes. And you're still saying it? Yes. For 1 second, she thought she might hit him. Instead, she stepped close enough that the guards shifted. Listen to me carefully, she said, voice trembling with fury. I have been abandoned, lied to, hunted and dragged into your fortress in the middle of a storm. I watched you nearly die twice. I found out the man who attacked my hospital might be my father. I found out my mother is alive. I found out my necklace is apparently worth a war. So no, Luca, you don't get to decide. I'm too fragile for the truth. His eyes moved over her face, slowly, dangerously, like he was memorizing the exact moment. She stopped being afraid of him. Then, quietly, he said, You're not fragile. The words sank into the rain between them. Elena's anger faltered. Luca's gaze dropped to her mouth for the briefest second. Then pain cut across his face. His knees weakened again. This time, Elena didn't pull away. Nurse? Marco said sharply. I know. Elena grabbed Luca's jaw, forcing him to look at her. You are going inside. You are lying down. And if you try to intimidate one more person before I stitch you up, I will sedate you myself. Marco blinked. A guard near the door looked away like he was hiding a smile. Luca stared at Elena with something dark and almost amused in his eyes. You threaten me very comfortably. I'm adapting. His mouth curved, faint and dangerous. That's what worries me. They took him upstairs to a room that looked like a luxury suite built for a king who expected betrayal. High ceilings, dark wood, glass walls overlooking the storm, a fireplace burning low, a wall of monitors showing security feeds from every gate, hallway and exterior road. Medical equipment had already been set up beside the bed, like this had happened before. Elena noticed that. Of course she noticed that. Men like Luca did not prepare for peace. They prepared for being dragged home bleeding. Sit, she ordered. Luca sat on the edge of the bed, only because standing was no longer an option. Elena washed her hands in the attached bathroom, then returned with sterile gloves and a tray of supplies a silent older woman had brought in. The woman introduced herself only as Rosa, then left with a look that lingered on Elena's face too long, like she knew something too. Everyone here seemed to know something. Everyone except Elena. Luca watched her cut away the soaked bandages. The bullet wound in his shoulder was ugly but clean enough to manage. The earlier wound in his torso had torn open from his efforts at the hospital. Blood had clotted around the edges. His skin was hot beneath her fingers. You need a surgeon. I have you. I'm not a surgeon. You're better under pressure than most surgeons I know. That is not medical advice. It's confidence. It's delusion. His eyes stayed on her. You saved me. Elena looked away first. Not because she was scared, because his voice had gone too low, too intimate. She focused on the wound, on antiseptic, on gauze, on the small, controlled pain of doing something she understood, while her entire life collapsed around her. Luca didn't flinch when she cleaned the torn flesh. Not once. That bothered her more than it should have. Does anything hurt? She asked. Yes. His honesty surprised her. She glanced up. His eyes were on her again. Not the wound. Heya. What? She asked. You. Her hand froze. The fire cracked softly across the room. Rain beat against the glass. Elena forced herself to keep working. Blood loss makes people say stupid things. I was saying stupid things before blood loss. Good to know it's a chronic condition. This time, he did laugh. A low, brief sound that warmed the room for half a second before vanishing. Then his face tightened, not from pain, from memory. You asked what Marisol meant. Elena's hand slowed. She didn't look up. Yes. My father was murdered by Dante Russo. The words fell between them like a body hitting water. Elena's breath caught. Luca's voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. I was 19. My father had built his empire on fear, but he had rules. No hospitals, no children, no wives, no informants dragged into public streets. Russo believed rules were weakness. Elena looked at him now. His face was unreadable, but his eyes weren't. There was a boy buried there, one who had watched something he could never unsee. Dante arranged a meeting under a truce flag. Luca continued. My father went because he thought old blood still meant something. He was wrong. Russo killed him in front of me. Elena's anger quieted. Not disappeared. Quieted. I'm sorry, she said before she could stop herself. Luca looked at her like the words were unfamiliar. He made me watch, he said. Then he told me grief would either ruin me or sharpen me. Elena's throat tightened. And? Luca's mouth hardened. I sharpened. The room felt colder. Suddenly, Elena understood why men obeyed him with one gesture. Luca Moretti had not become dangerous because he wanted power. He had become dangerous because power was the only language monsters respected. Where does my mother fit? She asked. For a moment, Luca said nothing. Then he looked toward the security screens, where rain blurred the driveway into streaks of silver. Marisol worked inside Russo's financial network. She had access to accounts, names, bribes, murder contracts. She knew where bodies were buried because she helped hide the paper trail. Elena's fingers clenched around the gauze. My mother wasn't a criminal. Luca looked back at her. Your mother was many things. That's not an answer. No, it's the truth. Elena stood abruptly, stepping away from him. The room seemed too small, too expensive, too full of men's versions of her life. You don't get to reduce her to that. I'm not. She raised me. She was scared, yes. She moved us constantly, yes. But she was kind. She made pancakes shaped like stars when we had flour. She sang old Spanish songs when she thought I was asleep. She sold her jewelry once to buy me a winter coat. Luca's face softened. Elena. No. Her voice broke. I need one part of my life to not be poisoned by men like you. The words hurt him. She saw it, and because she saw it, she hated herself. Luca slowly pushed himself upright despite the open wound. Elena. Marisol betrayed Russo. Good. She also betrayed my father. The room went silent. Elena stared at him. What? Luca's expression hardened, but his voice remained low. The meeting where my father died. Russo knew every entrance, every guard rotation, every safe route out. Someone gave him that information. Elena's heart began to pound. No. My father trusted Marisol. No. She was the only one outside the family who knew the location. Elena shook her head, backing away. You're lying. I wish I were. You hate Dante. You need me to hate him too. That's all this is. Luca's eyes flashed. I don't need to invent reasons for you to hate Dante Russo. He will give you enough himself. Then why tell me this now? Because the key around your neck opens the proof. Elena stopped. Her hand rose to the chain. Luca's gaze followed it. The key opens a private deposit box created under 3 names, he said. Marisol Vale, Dante Russo, and my father. Elena's chest tightened. What's inside? No one knows. Then how do you know it proves anything? Because the night my father died, he was carrying a ledger that disappeared. A ledger with every alliance, every payment, every betrayal in Chicago. Marisol vanished the same night. Russo spent 7 years hunting her. I spent 7 years hunting the ledger. Elena felt sick. And now everyone thinks I have it. You have the key. That's not the same thing. To men like Dante, it is. Elena looked at him, rain and firelight blurring in her vision. Did you know who I was when you came into my ER? No. Did you know my mother was alive? Luca's silence lasted 1 second too long. Elena went cold. You did. I suspected. The words hit worse than shouting. You suspected my mother was alive and didn't tell me? I had no proof. You had enough to order me not to trust her. Elena, you keep saying my name like it gives you the right to hurt me gently. His jaw clenched. She turned toward the door. Where are you going? To get answers from the woman who actually gave birth to me. Luca stood. Too fast. Blood ran down his side. Elena whipped around. Sit down. No. You will rip the stitches before I even place them. Then finish. I'm not finished talking. His eyes darkened. Neither am I. For 1 furious second, they stood facing each other across the room, both shaking for different reasons. Then the door opened. Marco stepped inside, expression grim. Boss. Luca didn't look away from Elena. Not now. Marco's voice lowered. It's the Raven. Luca's entire body went still. Elena remembered the black card from the hospital. The silver Raven. What is the Raven? She asked. Neither man answered. That was answer enough. Marco stepped deeper into the room. We traced the number that texted her phone. It bounced through offshore servers, but the origin wasn't Russo's people. Luca's face hardened. Where? Marco looked at Elena, then back at Luca. Inside our network. Silence swallowed the room. Luca's expression changed into something terrifyingly calm. A traitor, Elena whispered. Marco nodded once. And there's more. He held up a tablet. On the screen was security footage from the hospital locker room, grainy and red-lit from the emergency alarms. Elena saw the attacker with the knife searching her bag, saw him take the yellow envelope. Then another figure entered. A woman. Short, dark hair. Nurse's shoes. Blue scrubs. Elena leaned closer, stomach twisting. That's impossible. The woman turned toward the camera. For half a second, her face appeared clearly. Elena's blood turned to ice. Mrs. Alvarez. The older nurse who had held Elena's hand. The woman who had trained her on night shift. The woman who brought her soup when she had the flu. The woman, Elena, had trusted more than anyone at the hospital. On the footage, Mrs. Alvarez took the envelope from the attacker, then looked directly into the camera and smiled. Elena backed away. No. Luca's voice was low and lethal. She works for the Raven. Elena shook her head, but the denial had no strength. Marco swiped the screen. A second image appeared. The yellow envelope opened on a table. Inside was a photograph, not the one Dante had shown. This one was newer. Marisol Vale standing beside Luca's father, and between them, a little girl around 3 years old with dark hair and Elena's eyes. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 5 words. Elena is not Dante's daughter. Elena couldn't breathe. Her hand gripped the edge of the bed. Luca read the words. Once. Then again. For the first time, all the color drained from his face. Elena looked at him. What does that mean? He didn't answer. She looked at Marco. What does that mean? Marco's silence was worse. Luca finally spoke. Each word rough, unwilling. It means your mother wasn't hiding you from Dante, because you belonged to him. Elena felt the room tilt. Then who am I? The security monitors behind Luca suddenly went black. Onebiwan. Then the lights died. Darkness crashed over the room. A second later, emergency red light washed across Luca's face. The estate alarm began to scream. Marco grabbed his gun. From somewhere deep inside the mansion came the sound of glass breaking. Then gunfire. Luca reached for Elena. This time, she didn't fight him, because on the dead monitor, before the screen went black, a message had appeared in white letters. The girl opens the ledger. The girl ends both bloodlines. Elena stared at the darkness, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Luca's hand closed around hers, not as a captor, not as a king, as the only solid thing left in a world that had just erased her name, her father, her mother, and every truth she had ever held. Then Marisol's scream tore through the mansion, and somewhere in the blacked-out estate, the Raven had come for Elena. The mansion went dark like something alive had swallowed it. For one breath, Elena heard nothing but the estate alarm screaming through the walls. Then, the gunfire began. Not from outside. Inside, a brutal crack of bullets ripped through the lower floor, followed by shattering glass, pounding footsteps, men shouting in Italian and English, and somewhere beneath it all, Marisol's scream cutting through the mansion like a blade through skin. Elena moved before she thought. Luca caught her around the waist. No, my mother, that's what they want. I don't care. You should. She shoved against him, panic rising hot and wild. Let go of me. Another burst of gunfire thundered below. The glass wall overlooking the storm flashed with lightning, and for half a second, Elena saw Luca's face in red emergency light, pale from blood loss, jaw clenched, eyes burning, with the kind of focus that made men obey and enemies die. He was hurt, badly. The stitches she had not even finished were useless now. Blood soaked the towel she had pressed to his torso. His shoulder bled through the rough bandage, but his grip on her did not loosen. Elena, he said, low and hard. Listen to me. They cut my cameras. They breached my house. They knew exactly where Marisol was being held. That means whoever came inside already had access. The traitor? Yes. Then we don't know who to trust. His mouth tightened. No. Marco stepped to the door, gun raised, speaking into an earpiece. West Hall is down. 2 men not responding. East Wing under attack. They're moving toward the guest rooms. Marisol screamed again. Elena's entire body went cold. She looked at Luca. That's not a trap. That's fear. Something shifted in his eyes. He knew it too. Before he could answer, the bedroom door exploded inward. Marco fired first. A man in black tactical gear slammed backward into the hallway. 2 more shadows moved behind him, silent and fast. faces covered, silver raven pins flashing on their collars under the red lights. Marco took one down. The other fired. Elena ducked as bullets tore through the wall behind her. Luca threw himself in front of her, dragging her behind the bed with a rough sound of pain that went straight through her chest. Luca, stay down. He reached under the bed frame and pulled out a gun. Elena stared at him in disbelief. Of course there's a gun under your bed. He didn't look at her. There are 3. He rose just enough to fire twice. The shots were deafening in the closed room. The second attacker dropped. The third vanished into the hallway. Marco pressed himself to the doorframe, breathing hard. They're not Russo's men. No, Luca said. They're better. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed fresh gauze from the tray and pressed it to Luca's side. You cannot keep doing this. His eyes stayed on the hallway. Watch me. Stop acting like dying is impressive. That made him look at her. Even now, surrounded by smoke and bullets and betrayal, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Worried, nurse? I'm angry. At me? At everyone. Her voice cracked. But mostly at you because you keep standing in front of bullets like I asked you to. His expression changed. Barely. Enough. You didn't have to ask. The words hit too deep. Marco looked away, jaw tight, as if he had heard something he was not meant to hear. Then a voice crackled through Luca's earpiece, faint but desperate. Boss East Wing compromised. Marisol Vale taken. Repeat. Marisol is... The line went dead. Elena stopped breathing. No. Luca's face turned to stone. No. Elena whispered again, pushing to her feet. This time, he did not stop her. He stood with her, slowly, painfully, like every muscle had become a knife. Elena, he said, from this moment, you stay behind me. She turned on him. No. His eyes narrowed. No? No. She wiped rainwater, tears, and blood from her face with the back of her wrist. I stayed behind locked doors my whole life. I stayed behind my mother's lies. I stayed behind fear. I stayed behind everyone else's version of the truth. I'm not hiding while they take her again. This is not courage. This is shock. Then, use my shock before it wears off. For one long second. Luca stared at her. The alarm wailed. Smoke crawled beneath the door. Somewhere below, a man screamed. Then Luca reached to the nightstand, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small black pistol. Elena recoiled. No, you don't have to use it. Then why give it to me? So you understand the weight of the world you're standing in. He placed it on the bed beside her, not in her hand. Her choice. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Elena stared at the weapon. Then at Luca. I'm a nurse. I know. I save people. I know. Her hands trembled. But if someone tries to take you, Luca said softly, you run. If you can't run, you scream. If no one comes, you survive. Elena swallowed hard. Her fingers closed around the gun. It felt wrong, heavy, cold, like a sin made of metal. Luca watched her with no triumph in his face, only grim acceptance. Then he opened a hidden panel behind the bookshelf. A narrow passage appeared behind it, descending into darkness. Elena stared. Your bedroom has a secret tunnel? My house has many. Normal people have closets. I'm not normal people. No kidding. Marco stepped through first. Luca followed, one hand braced against the wall. Elena stayed close behind him, holding the pistol with both hands the way she had seen in movies, hating how unreal and terrifying it felt. The passage smelled like old stone and dust. Red emergency strips glowed along the floor, barely enough to see. The gunfire above became muffled, then distant, then suddenly close again as they descended toward the east wing. Elena's heart pounded. Every step downward felt like she was leaving her old life farther behind. No more hospital. No more protocols. No more hiding behind the blue scrubs that told the world she was useful, harmless, safe. Now she was walking through a Mafia boss's walls with blood on her clothes and a gun in her hand, because someone had taken her mother, because someone had stolen her truth, because apparently Elena Carter was not even Elena Carter. Marco stopped at a narrow viewing slit and looked out. 3 in the hall, he whispered. 2 Raven, 1 of ours. Luca's eyes sharpened. Who? Marco looked again. His jaw tightened. Vittorio. The name did something ugly to Luca's face. Elena noticed. Of course she noticed. Who is Vittorio? My uncle, Luca said. The cold in his voice made the passage feel smaller. Marco looked back at him. He's with them. For a second, even the alarm seemed to fade. Luca stood very still. Then Elena saw it. No talk, not disbelief, grief, buried so deep it had turned black. He opened the gates, Luca said. Marco said nothing. He didn't have to. Luca looked through the slit himself. Elena leaned close before he could stop her. Through the narrow gap, she saw a long corridor lit by emergency red. 2 masked Raven soldiers stood near a broken doorway. Between them stood an older man in an expensive dark suit, silver hair slicked back, posture elegant and cruel. Vittorio Moretti. He held Marisol by the arm. Marisol's face was pale, but she was alive. Elena's breath caught. Luca's hand clamped gently over her mouth before she could make a sound. His body was behind hers, close and hard and bleeding, his mouth near her ear. Quiet, he whispered. She nodded. He lowered his hand slowly. In the hallway, Vittorio spoke calmly to Marisol. You should have stayed dead. Marisol lifted her chin. You should have died with your brother. Luca went still. Elena felt it. Every inch of him became controlled rage. Vittorio smiled. My brother was sentimental. He trusted women with secrets and boys with empires. I corrected both mistakes. Marisol spat in his face. One of the Raven soldiers struck her across the mouth. Elena jerked forward. Luca held her back. His grip shook. Not from weakness now, from restraint. Vittorio wiped his cheek with a handkerchief, unbothered. Where is the second key? Marisol laughed, blood on her lip. Still asking the wrong questions after 7 years. Vittorio's smile faded. He leaned closer. The girl opens the ledger. That much we know. The key around her neck is only half the mechanism. Where is the other half? Elena's fingers went to her necklace. Half. The word echoed inside her. Luca's eyes cut to her. She whispered, barely audible. There's another key? Marisol's gaze flicked suddenly toward the wall. Toward them, just for 1 heartbeat. Vittorio noticed. His head turned. Luca moved instantly. He kicked the hidden panel open and fired before the first Raven soldier could raise his weapon. The hallway exploded. Marco went left. Luca went right. Elena dropped low as bullets tore into the stone behind her. The air filled with smoke and muzzle flashes. 1 Raven soldier fell. The other dragged Marisol backward, using her as a shield. Elena! Marisol screamed. Elena saw the soldier's gun lift toward Luca. She didn't think. She grabbed a metal tray from a broken service cart and hurled it with everything she had. It hit the soldier's wrist. The shot went wild. Luca turned, eyes flashing with surprise. Marisol drove her heel into the soldier's foot and twisted free. Marco tackled him through a side table, both men crashing into the wall. Vittorio backed away into the smoke, gun raised. Luca aimed at him. For 1 suspended second, uncle and nephew faced each other across the burning corridor. You killed my father, Luca said. Vittorio's expression softened, almost pitying. No, Luca. I gave you the throne. Luca fired. Vittorio vanished behind a marble pillar, the bullet shattering stone where his head had been. More gunfire erupted from below. Dozens now. The estate was under full assault. Vittorio's voice echoed through the smoke. You still think this is about revenge? Poor boy. This is about bloodlines. Your father understood too late. Marisol understood and ran. Russo understood and wanted to possess it. But the Raven knows what the girl really is. Elena's skin went cold. Luca shouted, "What is she?" Vittorio laughed. Then the lights flickered violently, and a blast rocked the far end of the corridor. The floor trembled beneath Elena's feet. A wave of heat rolled through the hall. Marco grabbed Marisol. Luca grabbed Elena. They ran down the east staircase, through smoke, past shattered portraits and burning curtains. The Moretti estate, once cold and untouchable, was breaking apart around them. Men fought in the foyer below, shadows moving through flashes of gunfire. Luca's guards clashed with masked Raven soldiers near the grand staircase. Broken glass glittered across the marble floor like ice. Rain blew in through the shattered front doors. At the bottom of the stairs, Dante Russo appeared. Elena froze. He stood in the ruined foyer with a gun in each hand and blood on his grey overcoat. 2 of his men were behind him, but he looked no less deadly for having fewer soldiers. His eyes found Elena first, then Marisol, then Luca. "Well," Dante said, "I see the family reunion grew complicated." Luca aimed at him. "Russo." Dante lifted his gun slightly. "Not tonight, Moretti. That's disappointing. I didn't come for you." Elena's stomach twisted. Dante looked at her. "I came for my daughter." Marisol stepped forward, voice sharp with fury. "She is not yours." Dante's face changed. Only for a second. A wound opened there, raw and ugly, before pride sealed it shut. "You don't get to say that after what you did." "What I did?" Marisol's laugh was broken. "I saved her. You stole her. She was never yours to claim." Luca's voice cut through them. "Enough." But Dante was staring at Marisol now like the whole burning mansion had disappeared. "You let me mourn a child who was alive." Marisol's face trembled. "I let you hunt a ghost instead of a little girl." "And whose little girl was she?" Dante demanded. Silence fell, even with the gunfire around them. Elena could not breathe. Marisol looked at Luca, then not Elena. Her eyes filled with a grief so old it seemed to have aged her from the inside. "Elena," she whispered. "I was going to tell you when you were safe." Elena laughed, but it sounded like a sob. "I have never been safe." Luca stood beside her, breathing hard, bleeding through everything, but steady now in the way a man became steady when the truth was about to ruin him. Marisol swallowed. "Your father was Alessandro Moretti." The world stopped. Even the fire seemed silent. Elena turned slowly toward Luca. His face had gone white. Not pale from blood loss, white from devastation. Alessandro Moretti. Luca's father. The man Dante had killed. The man Marisol had been accused of betraying. The man in the photograph. Elena's mind rejected it, then rebuilt the world around it. No, that would make Luca. Her throat closed. Luca stepped back from her as if he had been struck. Dante stared at Marisol in disbelief. "You lying." "It's the truth," Marisol said, voice breaking. "Alessandro found out too late. Vittorio found out before him. Russo would have used her to destroy them both. Vittorio would have killed her to keep the bloodline clean. I ran because every man in this war wanted her either owned or dead." Elena could not feel her hands. She looked at Luca. The dangerous pull between them. Every touch, every look, every breathless moment in the SUV, every charged silence, all of it shattered into horror. "Luca," she whispered. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The great Luca Moretti, king of Chicago's underworld, looked suddenly like a man standing over his own grave. Then Vittorio's voice came from the upper balcony. How touching. Everyone looked up. Vittorio stood above them, one hand gripping the railing, blood on his temple, a detonator in his other hand. Behind him, Mrs. Alvarez stepped out of the shadows. Elena's heart twisted violently. The older nurse looked nothing like the gentle woman who had brought soup and remembered birthdays. Her face was cold now, empty of apology. In her hand was the yellow envelope. Mrs. Alvarez. Elena whispered. The woman smiled sadly. I did care for you, Nina. Don't call me that. I cared enough to keep you alive until the raven was ready. Elena felt sick. Marisol screamed, Carmen, don't! Carmen, not Mrs. Alvarez. Another lie with a familiar face. Carmen Alvarez opened the envelope and pulled out a small black velvet pouch. From it, she removed a second key. Gold. Ancien. Beautiful. Elena's silver key warmed against her chest, like it recognized its other half. Vittorio smiled down at them. The ledger was never paper, he said. It was a vault. Alessandro built it with Marisol when he realized the old families were becoming animals. Every account, every murder, every child taken, every judge bought, every secret that could collapse Chicago's underworld in one night. His eyes found Elena, and only Alessandro's true blood can open it. Elena staggered. Luca reached for her instinctively, then stopped himself. That tiny hesitation hurt more than the truth. Vittorio saw it, and smiled wider. There it is, the perfect cruelty. The king protected the girl before knowing she was his father's bastard. Luca's gun lifted. His voice was deadly quiet. Say one more word. Vittorio pressed his thumb to the detonator. Everyone froze. I've wired the West Foundation. Shoot me, and we all burn. The mansion groaned around them. Fire crawled up the curtains behind him. Rain lashed through the broken doors. Dante aimed at Vittorio. You were Raven? Vittorio laughed. Russo, you were always too emotional to see the board. Dante's face hardened. For once, he looked less like a villain and more like a man realizing he had been used. Carmen held up the gold key. Bring the girl, she said, or the vault opens without her body intact. Luca stepped in front of Elena. No. Elena stared at his back. Her almost brother, her protector, her danger, her impossible ruined pull. Tears burned her eyes, but fear was changing shape inside her. It had been panic before. Now it became something colder. She was tired. Tired of being hidden. Tired of being claimed. Tired of men burning the world down around her and calling it protection. Elena stepped around Luca. He turned sharply. Elena! She ignored him. Her eyes stayed on Vittorio, then Carmen, then Dante, then her mother. All of them had pieces of her life. None of them owned it. You want Alessandro's blood? Elena called up. Vittorio's smile sharpened. Yes. She reached up and tore the silver key from her neck. Luca moved. Don't. Elena looked at him. Her voice shook. But it did not break. I'm done being the thing everyone fights over. Then she walked toward the center of the foyer. Carmen's smile faltered. Marisol cried, Elena, please. Dante took a step forward. Don't be stupid. Luca's voice was the one that almost stopped her. Elena. She turned. His eyes were raw now. No mask. No king. Just a wounded man, losing one more piece of his family. And maybe something else neither of them was allowed to name anymore. If you go with them, he said, I may not get you back. Elena swallowed. You don't get me back, Luca. Pain crossed his face. She looked away before it could break her. I get myself back. Then she lifted the silver key. Vittorio leaned over the balcony, triumphant. But Elena was not looking at him anymore. She was looking at the chandelier above the foyer, at the chain cracked by gunfire, at the fire weakening the ceiling, at the way every armed man had turned his attention to her. Nurse. Invisible girl. Abandoned daughter. Hidden blood. She had spent her life watching rooms carefully, because survival depended on noticing what powerful people ignored. She raised the gun Luca had given her, not at Vittorio, not at Dent, at the chandelier chain. Luca understood 1 second before everyone else. Elena, down. She fired. The shot cracked through the foyer. The chain snapped. The massive chandelier tore loose from the ceiling and crashed onto the marble between Luca's men and the Raven soldiers in an explosion of glass, sparks, and fire. Chaos erupted. Dante fired at the balcony. Vittorio ducked. Marco grabbed Marisol. Luca lunged for Elena as Carmen screamed, and the gold key flew from her hand. Elena hit the floor hard, glass cutting her palms. Luca's body covered hers again, but this time she shoved him aside just enough to crawl through the debris. The gold key skittered across the marble toward the flames. Carmen dove forward. So did Elena. Their hands reached it at the same time. Carmen grabbed Elena's wrist, nails digging deep. "You foolish girl," she hissed. "You have no idea what you are." Elena looked into the face of the woman who had pretended to love her, then slammed her forehead into Carmen's nose. Carmen cried out. Releasing her, Elena snatched the gold key. A hand grabbed her from behind. "Don't." For half a second, terror shot through her. But he wasn't pulling her toward him. He was pulling her out of the line of fire. A Raven soldier's bullet struck the floor where she had been. Dante shoved her behind a pillar, his face inches from hers. "You are not my daughter," he said, voice rough with something almost broken. "But I did love the child I thought was mine." Elena stared at him, breath shaking. "Then prove it." Something changed in his face. A decision. He turned and fired into the smoke, covering Luca, as Luca fought his way toward them. For one impossible moment, Moretti and Russo were not enemies. They were two dangerous men aiming their violence in the same direction. Because of her. Because of the ledger. Because the Raven had made one mistake. They had revealed that Elena was worth more alive than hidden. Luca reached her, blood and rain and ash streaking his face. "Do you have it?" She opened her hand. The gold key lay across her palm. Beside it, the silver key burned cold against her fingers. Luca looked at both keys, then at her. The grief was still there, the shock, the impossible truth between them. But beneath it, something steadier remained. Protection, not possession. Not anymore. "We need the vault," Elena said. Luca nodded once. "Basement level." Vittorio's voice roared from above. "Stop them." The mansion shook again. A deeper blast this time. The west wing windows exploded outward, fire blooming into the storm. Marco shouted, "Foundation charges! We have minutes!" Luca grabbed Elena's hand. This time, she let him. Not because she belonged to him, because they were running toward the same truth. They descended through a hidden staircase behind the ruined fireplace. Luca, Elena, Marco, Marisol, and Dante forced into the same narrow passage while the war burned above them. No one spoke. There was too much blood between them, too much history, too many dead. At the bottom waited a steel door, embedded in old stone, 2 keyholes, 1 silver, 1 gold. Elena stared at it, chest heaving. Marisol touched her arm. "I'm sorry." Elena didn't look at her. Not now. Luca stood beside the door, gun raised toward the stairs. Dante covered the rear. Marco listened for movement above. Elena placed the silver key into the left lock. Her hand shook. Luca noticed. He covered her hand with his, then stopped, as if remembering he no longer had the right. Elena looked at him. For 1 second, the world was heartbreak and fire. Then she whispered, "Help me." His hand closed over hers. Together, they turned the silver key. Marisol inserted the gold one. The vault unlocked with a deep, mechanical groan. Inside, lights flickered on one by one. Not boxes, not papers. Servers, drives, files, photographs, recordings, names. A secret city beneath the city. Every crime, every alliance, every betrayal. Enough to end empires. Enough to start wars. Enough to explain why Elena had been hidden. Then, a screen at the center of the vault lit up. A video began playing automatically. Alessandro Moretti appeared on the monitor, younger than Elena expected, with Luca's eyes and Elena's mouth. His voice filled the vault. If my daughter is watching this, then I failed to keep you safe. Elena's knees weakened. Luca caught her. This time, she didn't pull away. Alessandro looked directly into the camera, eyes haunted. Elena, the Raven is not a family. It is not a gang. It is a council. Judges, politicians, police chiefs, hospital board members, men who use men like us as weapons and then call themselves clean. Dante went still. Marco cursed softly. Marisol began to cry. Alessandro's voice lowered. And Luca, my son, if you are with her, protect your sister not because she is blood, but because she is the only one who can decide whether our world deserves to survive. Luca closed his eyes. The word sister landed between them like a final bullet. Elena covered her mouth, tears spilling now, silent and unstoppable. Then the screen flickered. A live feed interrupted the video. Vittorio appeared, face blooded, smiling. Behind him, Carmen held a gun to Marisol's head. Elena spun. The Marisol beside them screamed, but it was too late. Not Marisol. A double. A woman with Marisol's face. A mask. A deception. The real Marisol was upstairs. Vittorio's voice filled the vault. You opened it. Thank you, Elena. The servers began flashing red. Luca lunged toward the control panel. Too late. A countdown appeared on the screen. 0小时03分. Vittorio smiled. Now choose. Save your mother, or save the truth. The vault door began to seal behind them. Elena turned toward Luca, heart pounding as the countdown burned red across the room. Above them, Marisol screamed her name again. And for the first time that night, Elena understood the cruelty of power. It never asked what you loved. It made you choose what you could live without. The vault door descended with the slow, merciless weight of a coffin lid. Elena ran toward it. Luca caught her before she reached the closing gap. No! Her scream tore through the steel chamber, raw and animal, as the last slice of hallway disappeared behind the vault door. The lock sealed with a deep mechanical thunder that shook the floor beneath her shoes. On the monitor, the countdown glowed red. 0小时02分43秒. Above them, through the speakers Vittorio had hijacked, Marisol screamed again. Elena. Elena slammed both hands against the sealed door. Open it! Marco was already at the control panel, fingers flying over the system. Dante searched the walls for a manual release, cursing under his breath. Luca held Elena by the shoulders, not restraining her this time, anchoring her. Look at me, he said. She shoved him. My mother is up there. I know. Then open the door. I'm trying. No, you're thinking. Tears blurred her vision, rage burning through them. You're calculating. You're deciding what matters more. His face tightened. Because she was right. Because that was what men like Luca had been trained to do. Weigh blood against power, life against leverage, love against war. Elena looked past him to the servers blinking red inside the vault. Alessandro Moretti's truth. The proof that could destroy the Raven. The proof her mother had sacrificed everything to hide. The proof that had turned Elena's life into a battlefield before she even knew her real name. 0小时02分18秒. Dante slammed his fist into the wall. There has to be another way out. Marco's jaw clenched. This vault was built to survive raids, bombs, betrayal. Once sealed, it only opens from outside unless the internal system finishes its purge. Purge? Elena turned slowly. Marco didn't answer quickly enough. Luca did. If the countdown completes, the vault destroys everything inside. The words struck her silent. Everything. The ledger. The proof. The names. Her father's message. The truth people had died for. Elena laughed once, empty and broken. So, that's the choice. No one spoke. The red numbers reflected in Luca's eyes. Save Marisol, or save the truth. Her mother, or every other daughter hidden, bought, threatened, silenced by the raven. Elena backed away from Luca. No. Elena, no. Her voice grew steadier, colder. This is exactly what they do. They make the truth feel selfish. They make love feel irresponsible. They corner people until every choice feels like betrayal. She turned toward the monitor where Vittorio's face still smiled down at them, smug and bloodied and certain. He thought he had won because everyone before Elena had played by the same rules. Men with empires. Men with guns. Men with secrets. Men who believed the person holding the most power controlled the ending. But Elena had spent her life powerless. Powerless girls learned something powerful men forgot. There was always something left to break. She looked at Marco. Where is the physical drive? Marco blinked. What? The ledger. The main source. These servers are backups or access points, right? The actual core has to be somewhere protected inside the vault. Luca's eyes sharpened. Marco looked toward the far wall, where a glass case sat beneath a biometric scanner. Inside it rested a black data module about the size of Elena's palm. There, Marco said, but it's locked to Alessandro's bloodline. Elena moved before anyone could stop her. Luca grabbed her wrist. It may be trapped. Everything is trapped. She pulled away, crossed the vault, and stood in front of the scanner. A small needle extended beneath the panel. Bloodline access. Of course. Everything in this world wanted blood. Elena stared at the needle, then pressed her thumb down. Pain pricked her skin. The scanner lit blue. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the glass case opened. Dante exhaled sharply. Damn. Elena took the data module. It was heavier than it looked. So small for something that could bury monsters. 0小时01分31秒. Luca stepped beside her. If we remove it, the purge may trigger faster. Can you copy it? Marco shook his head. Not enough time. Elena turned the module over in her hand. Her father's truth. Her mother's sacrifice. Luca's entire war. Dante's vengeance. The raven's fear. All of it. Resting in her palm. Then she heard Marisol again over the speakers. Elena, don't listen to him. Don't. A sharp crack cut her off. Elena var still. The sound had been unmistakable. A slap. Luca's face changed into murder. Dante raised his gun toward the ceiling, as if he could shoot through stone. Vittorio's voice returned, smooth and pleased. Time is almost gone, little niece. I wonder what kind of woman you are. Your mother's daughter, or your father's? Elena looked at the screen. For the first time that night, she did not feel small beneath his attention. She felt clear. I'm mine, she whispered. Then she turned to Luca. Shoot the server racks. Marco stared. What? Luca understood faster. His eyes locked on hers. You want to force the purge into emergency preservation. Will it work? Maybe. Maybe is better than choosing. Dante looked between them. Explain. Luca grabbed Marco's spare magazine from his belt. The system was designed by my father. If internal destruction begins before external purge completes, it may prioritize preserving the core and opening an emergency release to protect the bloodline holder. May? Dante snapped. Luca loaded his gun. We're improvising. Elena almost smiled. Almost. Luca saw it, and something painful crossed his face. A ghost of what could have been before the word sister had burned everything else away. Then he handed her a second magazine. Not as a fragile woman. Not as a secret. As someone standing beside him in the fire. "You ready?" he asked. Elena gripped the data module in one hand and the silver key in the other. "No." His mouth tightened. "Good answer." Then Luca fired into the server wall. Marco followed. Dante fired next. Sparks exploded across the vault. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. The red countdown flickered violently as bullets ripped through rows of blinking lights. Smoke burst from the systems, thick and electric, filling the chamber with the burning smell of wires and secrets. Elena ducked behind the central console, holding the core drive against her chest. The screen glitched. 0小时0分49秒 0小时0分48秒 Then the numbers froze. For one agonizing second, nothing happened. Then every light in the vault turned white. A cold mechanical voice filled the chamber. Bloodline preservation protocol activated. Marco laughed once in disbelief. "Boss." The vault door unlocked. Luca grabbed Elena's hand. "Run." The steel door rose only halfway before they dropped and slid beneath it into the passage beyond. Dante came after them. Marco followed last, firing one final shot into the smoking vault before the door slammed down again behind them. An explosion detonated inside. The floor kicked upward. Elena hit the wall hard, Luca's arm wrapping around her before she could fall. Heat blasted through the seams of the vault door, followed by smoke and darkness. But the data module was still in her hand. The truth had survived. Now they had to make sure Marisol did too. They ran upstairs into hell. The mansion was dying around them. Fire crawled along the west corridor. Rain poured through broken windows. Luca's men fought Raven soldiers room by room, no longer elegant shadows but bloodied survivors refusing to surrender their home. The air shook with gunfire, alarms, and the groan of collapsing beams. Elena moved faster than fear now. Something had changed in her, inside that vault. She was still afraid. She was still bleeding from cuts across her palms. She still felt shattered by every truth that had been forced into her chest. But the invisible girl was gone. The nurse who asked permission to survive was gone. In her place was someone who understood why her mother had run, why Luca had sharpened, why Dante had mourned a lie until it became hatred. Power was not cruelty. Power was choice. And Elena was done letting other people choose for her. They reached the upper balcony. Vittorio stood near the grand staircase with Marisol on her knees before him, a gun pressed beneath her chin. Carmen Alvarez stood beside him, face bloodied from Elena's strike, one hand clutching a pistol, the other pressed to her broken nose. Vittorio looked surprised when he saw them, then furious. "You opened the emergency release." Luca raised his gun. "My father was always smarter than you." Vittorio's face twisted. "Your father was weak." Elena stepped forward. Luca's arm moved instinctively, but he stopped himself before blocking her. She noticed. So did Vittorio. So did everyone. Elena lifted the black data module. Vittorio's eyes locked onto it. The whole room shifted around that small object. "The ledger is out," Elena said. Vittorio smiled thinly. "And you think you can use it? You're a nurse with blood on her shoes." "No," Elena said. "I'm Alessandro Moretti's daughter." The words echoed through the burning foyer. Luca closed his eyes briefly. Marisol sobbed. Dante looked away. Elena felt the pain of it, but she did not let it bend her. "And I'm Marisol Vale's daughter," she continued. "The woman who survived you. The woman you couldn't break. The woman who hid me from every monster in this room until I was strong enough to stand here myself." Vittorio's jaw tightened. Elena's voice hardened. "You wanted to know what kind of woman I am." She stepped closer to the railing. The firelight burned behind her. Rain blew through the shattered windows, whipping her hair across her face. Her scrubs were soaked in blood and smoke, torn at the sleeves, no longer the uniform of someone invisible. They were armor now. "I'm the woman who ends this." Vittorio laughed. Then Elena pressed the data module into a small port beside Luca's security console on the balcony wall. Marco's eyes widened. Elena. The monitors across the foyer flickered back to life, not with security feeds, with files, names, photos, bank transfers, videos, judges, police chiefs, hospital board members, politicians, raven symbols beside accounts and murder orders. Every screen in the mansion lit up with the same message. Ledger broadcast initiated. Vittorio's smile vanished. Carmen went pale. Luca stared at Elena. What did you do? Dante whispered. Elena looked at him. I stopped hiding it. Marco checked the console, shock spreading across his face. It's uploading through every external channel in the estate network. Newsrooms, federal databases, encrypted drops, private servers. Luca's gaze burned into Elena, but this time there was no command in it, only awe. Vittorio snarled and shoved the gun harder against Marisol's throat. Stop it. Elena turned back to him. No, I'll kill her. Marisol looked at Elena through tears, and slowly, heartbreakingly, she shook her head. Don't stop. Elena's heart split open, but this time, choice did not destroy her. It transformed her. She looked at Luca. He understood. So did Dante. For one impossible second, three enemies moved as one. Elena threw the silver key. Not at Vittorio. At Carmen. Carmen flinched and fired reflexively. The shot went wild, striking the chandelier wreckage below. Luca fired at Vittorio's gun hand. Dante fired at Carmen's shoulder. Marco sprinted up the side stairs. Marisol dropped flat as Vittorio screamed, his gun spinning away across the floor. Elena ran. Carmen lunged for her with a knife from her sleeve. Elena caught her wrist with both hands, the way she had once caught violent patients in the ER. Carmen was stronger, trained, furious. But Elena was done being gentle with women who used tenderness as a disguise. Carmen hissed, You think they'll let you live after this? Elena drove her knee into Carmen's stomach. Carmen doubled over. Elena grabbed her by the collar and slammed her against the wall. I don't need them to let me. Carmen stared at her, stunned. Elena's voice dropped. I decide. Then she shoved Carmen into Marco's arms as he arrived. Below, Vittorio staggered toward the broken stairs, blood streaming from his hand. Luca advanced on him slowly, gun raised, wounded but terrifying. Dante stood on the opposite side, cutting off his escape. For the first time, Vittorio Moretti looked afraid. You need me, Vittorio said. The Raven is bigger than me. Luca's face was colder than death. Then you should have stayed useful. Elena stepped between them. Luca stopped instantly. Dante lowered his weapon a fraction. Vittorio laughed through the pain. Look at that. The little sister controls the king. Elena turned toward him. The word still hurt. Sister. But it no longer made her weak. It made her dangerous in a way Vittorio could not understand. No, she said. The king finally learned to listen. Luca's eyes flickered. Vittorio sneered. You'll regret mercy. This isn't mercy. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not hospital sirens. Police. Federal vehicles. News helicopters began to thunder faintly through the storm beyond the estate grounds. Marco looked at the monitors. The broadcast reached them. Elena looked at Vittorio. You wanted bloodlines, secrets, control. But men like you never feared death as much as exposure. Vittorio's face hardened, then cracked. Just slightly. Enough. Dante smiled without warmth. She's right. Prison will hurt you more. Luca kept the gun on his uncle, but did not shoot. That restraint cost him. Elena saw it in his face, and respected him for it. Raven soldiers began dropping their weapons below, as Luca's surviving men surrounded them. Outside, lights flooded the driveway through the broken gates. The storm was no longer hiding the mansion. It was revealing it. Marisol crawled toward Elena. Elena dropped to her knees before her mother could reach her. For a second, neither of them spoke. There were too many years between them. Too much pain. Too many explanations waiting behind the impossible fact of survival. Then Marisol touched Elena's face with shaking fingers. "My brave girl," she whispered. Elena's tears finally fell. Not softly, not beautifully. They broke out of her with the violence of everything she had swallowed since 16. "You left me," she sobbed. Marisol's face crumpled. "I know. You led me think I wasn't worth coming back for. I know. I waited for you." Marisol pulled her into her arms. This time, Elena let herself be held. Not because everything was forgiven. It wasn't. Maybe it wouldn't be for a long time. But because the little girl who had waited by windows deserved this one moment, even if the woman she became still needed answers. Across the balcony, Luca watched them. His expression was unreadable again. But Elena knew better now. He was not empty. He was full of things he had never learned how to survive. His father's daughter was alive. His uncle had betrayed him. The woman he had been drawn to was his blood. And yet the pull between them had not vanished cleanly. It had changed, mutated into something more painful, more sacred, more forbidden in a different way. Protection without desire. Love without possession. Family where obsession had almost taken root. Elena stood slowly, wiping her face. Federal agents flooded the foyer below, shouting orders, weapons raised. Luca's men lowered theirs, only when Luca gave a small nod. Dante placed his guns on the floor with a bitter smile, raising his hands as if surrendering to history rather than law. One agent shouted Luca's name, another shouted Dante's. Vittorio was dragged down the stairs in cuffs, still screaming about names they didn't understand, deals they couldn't imagine. People powerful enough to bury everyone in the room, but the screens kept playing. The ledger kept uploading. The Raven had finally been dragged into the light. An agent approached Elena carefully. "Miss Carter?" Elena looked at him, then at Luca, then at Marisol, then at the burning ruins of the mansion that had tried to become her prison, and instead became the place where she stopped being hidden. "No," she said. The agent blinked. Elena lifted her chin. "My name is Elena Moretti." The name struck the room like a verdict. Luca's eyes softened with something close to pride. Marisol wept quietly. Dante looked down, accepting the final death of the daughter he had claimed from a lie. Elena turned toward the shattered front doors. Rain swept into the foyer. Beyond it waited police lights, cameras, questions, enemies, consequences, and a world that would never again see her as invisible. She walked down the stairs alone. No man's hand on her wrist. No gun pressed to her back. No secret hidden beneath her scrubs. At the bottom, reporters shouted from beyond the police line. "Elena, did you release the ledger? Are you Alessandro Moretti's daughter? Were you held hostage? Who is the Raven?" She stopped beneath the broken doorway. Rain touching her face like something clean. For a moment, she thought of the hospital, of fluorescent lights, of cereal over the sink, of unpaid bills, of silence, of the lonely girl who had thought survival meant becoming small enough not to be noticed. Then she looked back. Luca stood at the top of the stairs, bleeding and proud. No longer her captor, no longer her dangerous temptation, but the brother fate had returned to her through fire. Marisol stood beside him, alive, broken, waiting. Elena turned back to the cameras. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried. "I was hidden because powerful men were afraid of what I carried." The cameras flashed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver key. It gleamed in the stormlight. They were right. And as the first federal helicopter descended over the ruined estate, Elena Carter, Elena Moretti, stepped forward into the rain, no longer the secret everyone wanted to own. She had become the woman they would all have to answer to. Morning came slowly over Chicago, pale and quiet after the storm. The Moretti estate no longer looked untouchable. Its black iron gates hung open. One wing still smoked beneath the grey sky. Broken glass glittered across the marble steps. Federal agents moved through the wreckage carrying boxes, drives, weapons, names. Reporters stood beyond the police line, shouting questions that no longer reached Elena. She sat on the back of an ambulance with a blanket around her shoulders and dried blood on her hands. Not all of it was hers. For the first time in years, she had nowhere to run, and strangely she was not afraid. Marisol sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, not close enough to assume forgiveness. They had spoken very little. There were no words large enough for 7 stolen years. No apology strong enough to rebuild childhood. No explanation clean enough to erase the nights Elena had stared at her phone waiting for a mother who never called. But Marisol was there, alive, shaking, real. And sometimes, for now, real was enough. "I watched you grow up from far away," Marisol said quietly. Elena stared at the wet pavement. "Don't." Marisol's breath trembled. "I know I don't deserve to say it." "No." Elena's voice was soft but firm. "You don't." Silence settled between them. Then Marisol nodded, tears sliding down her bruised face. "Then I'll wait until you ask." Elena looked at her. That answer hurt less than all the others might have. No excuse, no demand, no desperate reach for instant forgiveness. Just waiting. Elena pulled the blanket tighter around herself and looked toward the mansion doors. Luca stood at the top of the ruined steps, refusing the stretcher 2 paramedics kept trying to force on him. His shirt was gone, his shoulder bandaged, his torso wrapped in fresh white gauze already stained at the edges. He looked exhausted, pale and furious that his body had limits. Marco stood beside him, arguing in a low voice. Luca ignored him. His eyes found Elena. Across police lights, smoke, shattered stone, and the death of every lie between them, he still had that same impossible gravity. But it felt different now. The danger was still there. The power, the darkness. Only now, Elena could see the grief beneath it. The brother she had never known had spent years becoming a weapon because no one had saved the boy he used to be. She stood. Marisol reached for her, then stopped herself. Elena noticed. That mattered. She walked toward Luca through the wreckage. A federal agent tried to stop her. Luca turned his head, gave one cold look, and the man stepped aside before remembering he was supposed to be brave. Elena almost smiled. Almost. "You need a hospital," she said when she reached him. Luca looked down at her, expression unreadable. "I dislike hospitals. You broke mine. A valid reason to avoid returning. You are still impossible. You are still bossy. I'm a nurse." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You're more than that." The words settled somewhere deep. A day ago, she would have looked away. Now she didn't. "So are you," she said. His jaw tightened slightly. Not from pain, from emotion he had no idea how to hold. Behind them, agents led Dante Russo past in cuffs. His grey coat was torn, his face bruised, but his posture remained proud. He stopped when he saw Elena. For a moment, neither spoke. The man who had terrified her, claimed her, almost stolen her, loved a lie so fiercely it became a wound. Dante's eyes moved to Marisol, then back to Elena. "I would have been a terrible father," he said. Elena's throat tightened. "Yes." A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "You have your mother's cruelty." "No," Elena said. "I have her survival." Dante accepted the correction with a slow nod. Then his gaze shifted to Luca. "Your father was a better man than either of us deserved." Luca's face hardened, but he did not deny it. Dante looked back at Elena one last time. "For what it's worth, little Carter." His voice roughened. "I am glad you lived." Then the agents took him away. Elena watched until he disappeared into the black SUV waiting beyond the gates. She expected to feel relief. Instead, she felt the strange sadness of a life she had never had closing behind him. Luca spoke beside her. "He'll testify." Elena glanced up. "Dante?" "Yes. Against the Raven. Against Vittorio. Against himself." "Why?" Luca looked toward the agents loading evidence from the estate. "Because you asked him to prove it." Elena remembered the foyer, the gunfire, the moment Dante pulled her out of death's path. Then she looked at Luca. "And you?" "What about me? What happens to Luca Moretti now?" A shadow crossed his face. For the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain, not weak, not lost, just human. "The empire my father built is exposed," he said. "The Raven is bleeding. The families will fracture. Men will come for whatever is left. And you'll fight them?" His mouth tightened. "That is what I know how to do." Elena stepped closer. "Maybe it's time to learn something else." Luca looked at her as if the idea was more dangerous than any gun aimed at him. "Like what?" She glanced back at Marisol, then at the ruined mansion, then at the city beyond the gates waking under a clean grey sky. "Like living without turning every wound into a throne." The silence that followed was gentle, painful, needed. Luca's eyes lowered to the silver key in Elena's hand. "Keep it," he said. "I was going to." A faint curve touched his mouth. For once, it did not look dangerous, just proud. Paramedics finally managed to guide him toward the ambulance. He went only because Elena walked beside him, and because Marco muttered something in Italian that sounded suspiciously like a prayer and a curse. As they reached the ambulance, Luca stopped. "Elena." She turned. He hesitated. Luca Moretti, who could command armed men with 2 fingers, seemed to struggle with 3 simple words. Then he said them anyway. "I'm sorry." Elena looked at him for a long time, for the fear, for the control, for the truth he had hidden, for the way he had protected her before he knew who she was, for the way they had almost become something the truth would have destroyed. Finally she said, "I know. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door left unlocked." Weeks later, Elena returned to the hospital. The ER doors had been replaced. Trauma Bay 3 had new glass, new monitors, new paint. People lowered their voices when she passed, not because they feared her, but because everyone had seen her face on the news. The nurse who opened the Moretti ledger, the hidden daughter, the woman who exposed the Raven. Some stared. Some whispered. Mrs. Alvarez's locker remained empty. Elena walked past it without stopping. At the nurse's station, a young resident looked up nervously. "Nurse Carter?" Elena paused, then smiled softly. "Vale Moretti," she corrected. The name still felt heavy, but it no longer felt like a cage. That evening, after her shift, she returned to the small apartment she had once hated for being too quiet. There was still cereal in the cabinet, still a cracked mug by the sink, still an old chair near the door, though she no longer needed it wedged beneath the handle. On the table sat a package, no return address. Inside was a framed photograph, Alessandro Moretti holding a little dark-haired girl on his lap. Marisol stood beside them, smiling with tired eyes. Behind the photo was a note written in Luca's sharp, controlled handwriting. "He loved you before the world knew how to fear you." Elena sat down slowly. For a long time, she cried. Not because she was broken, because pieces of her life were finally coming home. 3 months later, on a cold Sunday morning, Elena stood in front of a storage unit with Marisol beside her. Neither of them rushed. Box by box, they opened the past. Photographs, letters, false passports, birthday cards Marisol had written every year but never sent. Elena read each one. Some made her furious. Some made her ache. Some she folded back carefully and placed in a box marked later. Healing, she learned, did not arrive like sunrise. It arrived like dust in a locked room, slowly, everywhere. By spring, Luca had turned part of the Moretti fortune into a legal foundation for women and children hidden from violent men. The newspapers called it image repair. Prosecutors called it strategic cooperation. Marco called it the boss, pretending not to have a heart. Elena called it a beginning. She did not move into the mansion. She did not become a princess of the underworld. She kept her apartment, kept her job, kept the key. But every Sunday night, a black car waited outside the hospital. Sometimes Luca was inside, sometimes Marco, sometimes only a driver and a note. Dinner? No guns this time. Probably. Elena always rolled her eyes. And sometimes she went. Not because she was owned, because she was choosing. One evening, she found Luca alone in the rebuilt east garden of the estate. The burned wing had been torn down. In its place, white roses had been planted beneath iron arches, still blackened at the edges. He stood with one hand in his pocket, looking uncomfortable among living things. Elena came to stand beside him. "You look like you're waiting for the flowers to betray you. They're suspiciously quiet." She laughed. A real laugh. Luca turned toward her, and for a moment, the old darkness in his face softened into something that looked almost like peace. Marisol appeared at the garden entrance, holding 2 cups of coffee, waiting for Elena to decide whether she was welcome closer. Elena looked at her mother, then lifted her hand. Marisol came, slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal she had once failed to protect. The 3 of them stood together beneath the grey evening sky, not whole, not untouched, but alive. Elena reached into her pocket and closed her fingers around the silver key. For years, she had thought it was the last piece of a mother who abandoned her. Then, she thought it was a curse. Then, a weapon. Now, finally, it felt like something else. A reminder. Secrets could destroy families. Truth could destroy empires. But choice, real choice, could build something from the ashes. Luca looked at her. "What now, sister?" The word still hurt sometimes, but less each day. Elena looked at the rebuilt garden, at her mother, at the mansion that no longer felt like a prison, and then toward the city beyond the gates. Chicago was still dangerous. The Raven was wounded, not gone. Men with power would always fear women who carried truth, but Elena was no longer invisible. She smiled faintly. "Now," she said. The evening wind moved through the roses. "Now they learn I survived.